this because now we have an entire family, and I need to look into specifically Vioris's family, other relatives. Obviously, I'm not going to share any of their information. We've found a lot, but it would help. It would help us better understand why Kamala is hiding an entire piece of her family. It's completely bizarre. So what we want to do today, because so many of you guys are emailing me, is to just organize what we know for a fact, plus tell you a couple of new things that we've discovered in the last few hours. And then if you want to send me more stuff, just make sure it's one of the things, or it's pertaining to one of the things that we have a question mark on. So first, we're going to just go through a timeline of the relevant people. Let's start with Beryl Magdalene Christie. So we're going to actually give you guys this timeline so you can look through it. Anything that is italicized means that it's still a question mark. We're still wondering whether or not this document could be Beryl or could be somebody else, and we're awaiting a confirmation. What we know for a fact is that Beryl was born in 1917. We know this because we have the birth certificate, and Iris's name, which is Beryl's mother, is listed as Iris Finnegan on the birth certificate. Again, Beryl is spelled slightly differently, but we know because of Kamala's book that name spelling shifted over the years and was also spelled with a Y. We then have a document, and this is highly suspicious, that Beryl birthed Donald Harris. Allegedly, this could be Kamala's father. The only problem is that we're looking here not at a birth certificate, but a death certificate, which would put the birth of Donald around 1938. It looks like this infant died just a few months short of turning 2 years old. So could have been born in 1938, died in 1940 November. And it says, oddly, that this is the son of Albert Harris. So that's confusing. But this is the only document that we could find for a Donald Harris that has a mother named Beryl Harris. And again, that Donald died. So this one is a question mark. We know for a fact, however, that Beryl Magdalene Finnegan was married in 1944. She was 25 years old. We have that marriage certificate, and she was married to Lawford Newland. And here is where things get strange, because we were able to locate the divorce document between Lawford Newland and Beryl Magdalene, and that divorce took place in 1956. Okay, so they were married. That would mean if Donald Harris, J. Harris, was in fact born, Kamala's father was in fact born in 1938, and they didn't divorce until 1956, and he grew up with Beryl, as he signifies in his book, My Mother, Miss Beryl, or in his Jamaican paper that he wrote about his ancestral roots, that would mean throughout the majority of his young life, from the time he was 6 till the time he was 18, his mother, Miss Beryl, was married to Lawford Newland, and yet he declines to mention Lawford Newland at all. Major, major question mark. We move on to a possible death certificate, and I feel very strongly.
Listen, that's one thing about Candace. Candace does her research. It's hard to get something over on Candace. Candace do her research. She does her due diligence. That's a fact. Word.
That this is the correct death certificate. 1960 for a Beryl Christie Finnegan. We are learning here that she died of fibroids. And as we know, if this is a woman who suffered with birth, this could make sense. The story could make sense that she died a couple of years after she got divorced. But again, we're not completely sure. We're looking for something that is concrete, where we can say, yes, this Beryl Finnegan died in 1960, which then makes Kamala's timeline of having met her grandmother, who had died before she was even born, highly suspicious. Then we jump to 1995 because people have been sharing this other possible death certificate. And I'm going to rank this as a very low likelihood. One, because somebody sent me an email and they gave me a strong lead that this could actually be a different Beryl Christie Clark. And we're going to look into that further. But also because the person listed as having been there when she died was Douglas Finnegan. And we don't have a Douglas Finnegan in this family. And also, if you look at the date of death and the age, 81 years old, that would mean that this individual was born in 1914, which would have been before our Beryl was born. So we're going to continue to rule this one out by trying to locate who that Douglas Finnegan is that signed. But I rank this as a very low likelihood, but we want to keep it here as possible because it's not entirely ruled out. Now let's jump over to Oscar Joseph Harris, Beryl's alleged husband, who I am now certain was never her husband, and I'll explain why. Okay, we know for a fact that Oscar Joseph Harris, who Kamala purports is her grandfather in her book, was born in 1914. On April 5th, we have that birth document, making it all the more suspicious that we can't find her alleged father's, Donald Harris's, who was born after.
Do you guys see how thorough? Do you see how thorough Candace Owens is on getting information on Kamala Harris? Things like this will be the determining factor if she gets in office. It's small things like this. Over 900,000 views in less than 24 hours. Shout out to Candace Owens.
After him. We then know, which we discovered yesterday, super huge development, that he married and that wedding was recorded in the local newspaper, the Daily Gleaner. And you can see, even though it's a shadowed photo, that very much looks like the photo of Oscar Joseph Harris that she shared. And because of the details that were provided in this article, we know for a fact that it is him because it lists the fact that his brother Newton stood in as best man. And we know for a fact that Newton is the brother. So we know for a fact that they got married, and he died in 1976 in St. Catherine. We have his death certificate. Now, I want to point this out to you because this is actually something that's quite odd. Allegedly, he only had one child, and that child was Kamala's father. That's what we are told, that his only child was Donald J. Harris. But something's not right there, because if you look at this death certificate, look at the bottom here. You see that the person that is the informant letting them know that he died is Christopher Harris. And when you look under, it asks, what is your qualification? Essentially, what is your qualification to inform? And it's his son. It says in parentheses, his qualification is son. And so his son was there, and his son's name is Christopher Harris, not Donald Harris. And I'm just wondering, who is Christopher Harris? This is a major question mark. Donald Harris, do you have a brother named Christopher Harris? If not, is Donald Harris actually the son of Oscar Harris? We'll get into more of that later. Okay, now let's look at Viora Anita Cambridge Harris, because we know that she got married. What we know for a fact about her is that she was born in 1927.
She literally has the entire list. 1927, born, birth certificate. 1952, married to Oscar Joseph Harris. 1966, appears in Daily Gleaner in the civil service appointment. 1976, husband Oscar dies. 1991, United States naturalization form submitted. 1994, remarried to Errol McPherson. Wow, so she got married 18 years later. Wow, she has a lot of information.
Able to locate her birth certificate. Yes, Vioris Cambridge was born in St. Elizabeth, Jamaica. We know, again, as we already mentioned, that she married Oscar Joseph Harris, and we know that because there was a huge announcement about the wedding. And then we wanted to be able to track how long they stayed married for. Did they actually stay married until he died? And it looks like they did, in fact, stay married until he died. And this is how we know. Her name appears in that Daily Gleaner in 1966. So in the corner there, you can see that it says Vioris Harris, it says Mrs. Vioris Harris, implying that she is still married and she has been appointed to the senior postmaster position. So we know that they were still very much married at this time. And then we know that he died in 1976 and she kept his name by choice, okay, when she was naturalized in the United States, okay? We found her documents of naturalization. I'm going to show that to you. This is in 1991. And there is a portion of this where it explicitly asks her if she wants to change her name. So she has the option here to go back to Cambridge. Her husband is now dead, and she decides she doesn't want to do that. You can see number 4 there. I request that my name be changed to none. So when she was naturalized, she kept her married last name, which is Vioris Anita Harris. So major problem here again when we get into Donald J. Harris's story that he told in the newspaper about his Jamaican heritage, because we now know that they got married and then they stayed married until he died. So Mass Oscar, the entire time, was married to this white woman whose name is Vioris Cambridge Harris, pardon. We then know that at some point she was able to abandon her marriage and maybe just filed something that he was deceased. We have not located that form, so that's another question mark, but she did remarry a man named Errol McPherson. Okay, in 1994. We know that for a fact because there are records down in Florida that indicate that. And then we know that she died in 2019 in Broward County. Of course, I've already shared with you yesterday the funeral website. So if you guys are like me and you like to take notes, we're leaving this up for you so that you can know exactly what it is that we have and follow this timeline as we continue to investigate it. So let's talk about the major issues that our timeline presents. So I believe it is undeniable, having seen her face and her smile, that Vioris is very clearly related to Kamala Harris. Okay. So obviously we naturally think that this must be Kamala Harris's grandmother. But here's a problem. In order for that to be...
Can we please shout out Candace Owens? Candace Owens is very thorough when it comes to gathering information, collecting data, analyzing the facts, and distributing it to us. She's very thorough. Shout out to her. We have to look into Kamala Harris, and she's doing a great job at this. Let's check this out, and then I'm going to tap in, which I'll give y'all my opinion on some things.
Kamala Harris's grandmother, Vioris would have had to have birthed Donald Harris, Kamala's father, when she was just 11 years old. I find that to be extremely unlikely. Extremely unlikely that Vioris, and she would have been at Cambridge then, so they would have had to have had some sort of affair before they got married, okay? So he was born in 1938. She would have had to have been pregnant when she was 10, right? She would have been pregnant in 1937, gave birth in 1938. Then they decided to hold off on the wedding until 1944. You know, maybe they did. Maybe he got a 10-year-old pregnant and they waited until she was older to get married. But I think that's extremely unlikely that an 11-year-old girl gave birth. And if she did give birth, I don't think her father would have walked her down the aisle as he did. We learned that from the entry in the Gleaner, in the Daily Gleaner. It was announced that her father, V.S. Cambridge, held her hand as they walked down the aisle. I think your dad, if some random person knocked you up at the age of 10, probably wouldn't have done that. He probably would have chased him with a shotgun. I'm imagining here, but that was what we would have to believe in order for this to be Kamala's grandmother. And the other thing that I keep asking myself is, why lie about this? Why is Kamala hiding this woman who she's very clearly closely related to? That's the other issue that I have, because okay, yeah, I get it. They always want to lean into being Black, but people don't have a problem if you just have one white grandparent. You know, she could have tried to grift this in a different way. She could have tried to complicate it in a different way, but she was dead set on hiding this woman. Why? There's something here that we're missing about Vioris Cambridge Harris that presents a problem for Kamala Harris. Is it because of the age gap? Maybe. The thing is, Donald J. Harris is the biggest problem in our story. We keep arriving at the Donald J. Harris problem. This is what we need to really focus all of our attention to, because we don't have any birth certificate for him, despite the fact that we have birth certificates for everyone else around him. We've got birth certificates for his uncles. We have birth certificates for his father. We have birth certificates for every single person in his orbit. We have birth certificate for Vioris. There's no reason. It's very clear that they had no troubles keeping records in this family. But there is no birth certificate for Donald J. Harris. We also cannot find a marriage certificate for him. So we mentioned to you guys yesterday, we found a marriage announcement here in Jamaica. We also found a marriage announcement near Oakland. The announcement, we've also seen an entry for the divorce. An entry, by the way, we still have not been able to find a divorce docket. We're looking for it in the court system. It should be there. But why does he not have any concrete documents? Where is their actual marriage certificate? There was an announcement, by the way, for an annulment, also published near Oakland. that they had filed for an annulment in 1971. But again, we cannot locate the marriage certificate, and I find that to be problematic. What we do know, by the way, so that you guys don't go off in the wrong direction, is that the mother is listed as Goplin Iyer. So we were at first looking for Shyamala Iyer. It looks like when they were married, she was married under just Goplin Iyer. And so if you're going to try to locate this marriage certificate, I would suggest editing to looking for her name in particular. My instinct is that he maybe had a different name that he was using, a different legal name that he was using. And then there is the problem with his entire story that he presents when he writes about his Jamaican heritage. His memory is either extremely faulty or he's an outright liar. In his memory, he writes that he completely neglects to include the fact that his mother, who he calls Miss Beryl, was married to Lawford Newland and remained married to him for 12 years of his life, from the time he was 6 until he was 18 years old. That is a major problem. You don't forget that when you're writing about your upbringing. Yeah, actually, she was married to somebody else. He recounts growing up with Oscar Harris, right? Mass Oscar, as he refers to him, and Miss Beryl. But both of them were married to other people when he was growing up, not to one another. This is why we cannot find a marriage record between Beryl and Oscar. My conclusion is they were never married. They were never married because Oscar was married to his wife, Vioris, until he died in 1976. So Donald's story makes entirely no sense. He lied or he misremembered. And in fact, the only scenario in which he is telling the truth about all of them being there on the farm at the exact same time is if Miss Iris was actually Vioris, the white woman, okay, who was married to his father, Oscar Harris, Mass Oscar, with the domestic help, Miss Beryl Finnegan, and who died young, and her mother, Iris Finnegan, on hand. That could make sense to me, right? Because I understand how that works, how an entire family will work on a farm for another family. As you know, my grandfather grew up on a sharecropping farm in the South. This would have been around that same time. My grandfather was born in 1942. So I could see that making sense. But then again, we would have to arrive at the diabolical conclusion that she turned the help into her family because she wanted the public to think that she had a blacker history of some description.
She turned the help into her family. You know, that is sad, man. We come to this point, man, that they can actually just throw somebody in front of us that look like us. Once again, just like they did with Barry, throw somebody in front of us that looks like us, but they really don't have good intentions for us. And it's sad, and people have their personal gripes with Trump. People have issues that they can pinpoint with Trump. There's things that he may say, there's things that he has done in the past that people don't agree with. That's understandable. But that's the case, and be independent. Don't choose a side. Then be independent. That's my thing.
Description. But as I said, we still have a major Donald Harris problem. We have no birth certificate. And we also don't know who or where Christopher Harris is, Oscar's son, who was present at the time of his death. I've looked up Christopher Harris in the records. I'm looking to see if there's any birth records in St. Anne Parish where they all seem to have been born. I've checked St. Elizabeth as well, because that's where Vioris was born. I can't find any trace of a Christopher Harris. If you have better luck, send it to me at info@CandaceOwens.com. But here is something that we do know about Donald Harris. We know for a fact that Donald Harris was a committed communist. And what do we know about communists in general? Communists change their identities the entire time. They steal identities and they change their name. That is like a witchcraft that they have perfected. Historically speaking, every major communist figure that you know changed their name. They don't use their real names. Joseph Stalin was not Joseph Stalin. Vladimir Lenin was not Vladimir Lenin. Pol Pot was not Pol Pot. A good commie knows that you have to change your identity and continually change your identity. Here's my theory, okay? And again, now we are speculating. We are in the theory zone. So these are not backed by facts. And I'm going to continue to look and I'll debunk my own theory if I come across different evidence. But my gut is telling me that Donald Harris is simply lying about who he is. I'm not even convinced that he is Kamala's father at all. Because as I said, the lie has to be so big that it was worthy of her changing who her grandparent was in the storyline. What is it that she's hiding? Kamala also looks a little too much like her grandmother. Do you kind of get where I'm going with this? I'm going to show you this picture of Kamala with who we are told is her mother, Shyamala Goplin. Shyamala, again, if you're looking for documents pertaining to her, don't use Shyamala. But this is just a picture of Shyamala in her youth, and we're going to compare that to who we now know is definitely her relative, Vioris. Who does Kamala favor here? Like how her mother looks extremely Indian on the left-hand side there, but actually, I don't think she looks like Kamala at all. Who does she favor more? Now, I want to be clear. That's just we're using our own eyes. The reality is that genetics can be extremely unpredictable, especially when you start race mixing. Obviously, I have racially mixed kids. I have my son, my third born, has blonde hair. He looks exactly like his father, but he looks exactly like his father. He looks exactly like his father. And I've seen kids that favor their grandparents. Like that could definitely happen. Like I said, genetics is funny business. You never know what gene you're going to hit. But I am just saying that she really, really, really favors Vioris, who she has gone through.
So basically, what I gather from all of this, shout out to Candace Owens once again. She's basically letting us know that um, Kamala Harris is a woman who favors her Indian side, and there's no such really heritage of black. Yeah, it comes from her father, but not necessarily that she favors that side. She favors the Indian side, her mother. Her father left at a young age. I remember George Bush saying something of the nature of, don't quote me, but George Bush said something like, how you were raised and where you were raised is a very big determination on who you are. And yeah, they'll put a woman in front of us with a little tint to her and say, this black woman, but she really favors her Indian side. She was raised by her Indian mother, not her black Jamaican father, or which he doesn't even really say he's black. Same thing as Barry. Barry was raised by his white mother, not his black father who left at an early age. We have to remember that. Love, life, and loyalty is the motto. Stay safe, stay real, and stay true. Rock with me, I rock with you. Peace out.